It's a land that is known dually as flyover country and home to some of the nation's most industrious cities. A land that has not only produced bread, oil, and cars, but some of the nation's most treasured heroes. A land where the heat makes steel and the chill steals you. This is the Midwest, the heart of the American spirit and home to one of the most ambitious transit proposals. In this episode, we interview the man behind the Midwest High-Speed Rail Association. Grab a seat and enjoy the ride. Hello everyone, I'm Demetrius Villa, the host of the American Rail Club. Today we have a special guest, the chairman and director of the Midwest High-Speed Rail Association, Mr. Rick Harnish. Rick, thank you for taking the time to be with us for this episode.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. It's so glad for you to be here. So tell us, how did you get started with high-speed rail and how did the association start?
Well, I got started because I got very upset when they started taking trains away from Cleveland. And I was very upset the day my dad said, you know, today is the last day there will be a train to Cleveland. Fortunately, trains came back in a slight way, you know, in the middle of the night. But so I've been learning, doing everything I can since then to understand why we stopped having good high quality trains and what we could do to bring them back. The association started as a group of about 15 or 20 business people who were really tired with airport security, which in 1993 was nothing like what it is today, and wanted to be able to take the train and not have to deal with airport security.
I could understand. I mean, I've been flying now ever since, I would say last year, I've started flying, and, you know, just airport security just takes so much time away to just actually getting on board.
Yes, yeah.
And then on top of that, the delays and everything. Well, I've started to live in the Midwest now for actually about the past year now, so it's going to be about a year in February. So, I mean, seeing the region and seeing how it's growing and everything so far, you really get to see that, you know, where the use of high-speed rail really gets to really start. So, what has the association been working on today and in the past? What's it been working on today?
Well, so our big priority right now is called the Illinois Fast Track Initiative. And Illinois is critical. If there was one person, if you had to pick one person that could change the direction of high-speed rail for the Midwest, it's the governor of Illinois. Because if you want to do Detroit to Chicago, Cleveland to Chicago, Columbus to Chicago, Madison to Chicago, you have to have Chicago on board. And that's the most expensive part of doing any of this. So right now we have a new governor, Governor Pritzker. We have a new General Assembly coming in. And there's significant talk about raising the gas tax to pay for new highway investments. And we're saying we need to make sure that high-speed rail is part of that mix. So the Illinois Fast Track Initiative is an effort to bring rail supporters from all around the state to communicate with the governor, communicate with the legislature. It's time to develop high-speed rail in Illinois.
All right, that sounds really great. And, you know, it's the rest of the region coming in. I mean, you have Indiana, you have Ohio, and all these other states over here that, you know, can really take from the boost of that, you know, from anywhere from Wisconsin, Michigan. You know, it's just incredible, the growth, and, you know, having Chicago as a hub for all that is really great. So we see other places, for example, Florida and Texas, really working on their own high-speed rail projects, but putting a lot more into privatization. Where do you see the Midwest going in terms of either privatization, state funding, or federal funding?
So the day that the highway network is paid for with private funds, there's little pieces here and there that are, but they're not really private, fully private. The day that highways are fully private is the day that we can talk about fully private trains. Now, Orlando to Miami is a unique example. Houston to Dallas is a unique example. And those are probably just a few of the potential. Another great one for private operation would be LA to Las Vegas. But really, when it comes down to it, you need to have Columbus on the network. You need to have Lafayette on the network. You need to really bring a lot of people together, and that means that the states have to take the lead.
Right. This is a major regional project. So tell us a little bit more about what does the proposal look like for Midwest high-speed rail?
So what we're suggesting is that two Metra-owned lines. So Metra is the commuter railroad here in Chicago, and they own two important lines. One that goes south, it's called the Metro Electric. Another one that goes out to the airport O'Hare. It's called the Milwaukee District. Those two should be modernized so that you can have modern commuter trains mixed with high-speed trains within Cook County, which is the county that Chicago is in. And then from there, we should add on segments of at least 100 miles per segment of track where the trains can go 200 miles an hour. So there would be one south to Champaign with a branch to Indianapolis, another that would go east towards Toledo, Cleveland, Detroit, and another that would go north. And then we would work with the private railroads so that they would run very high frequency service that would feed into those lines, and those lines would become funnels. So in the Indianapolis case, you would have Cincinnati to Indianapolis funneling in to go to Chicago, Lafayette would be a stop, Louisville, Columbus, and then so you'd be going in the same train 80 or 90 miles an hour from Cincinnati to Indianapolis, 200 miles an hour up to the boundary of Cook County, and then drop down to 125 to come into the city, but all on the same train.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And I mean, like you said, I mean, there's a whole bunch of feeder networks that go into there. I mean, just in the state of Indianapolis, because that's where I'm at right now. I mean, you have the way the state is put out is pretty crazy. They have everything in the middle. We're Indianapolis, but then you have all these other cities like Fort Wayne or Columbus or Bloomington, Lafayette, and they're all coming into here. So those feeder networks to go into those major cities. And you see a lot of that in the Midwest. I mean, even in Ohio, I mean, there's a lot of other cities or towns that are close by to a lot of these major cities like Columbus, Ohio, or Cincinnati that can feed into the network. And the same with Chicago.
Or if you look at Indianapolis as the center of the world, you've got Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, Detroit, Toledo, Cleveland, and to the east, Columbus, Pittsburgh. To the south, Cincinnati, and then Lexington, Columbus, Indiana, Louisville, Nashville, over to St. Louis. Indianapolis could be the center of a great transportation network.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it used to be. Actually, I think the first Union Station in the world was actually started in Indianapolis.
Yes, so Indianapolis Union Station was the first.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I mean, we look at the other. You're looking back at history, and even to today, you still have some lines. For example, Amtrak is running one of their most popular lines is the Hiawatha between Chicago and Milwaukee, and you have Milwaukee even now. They just started their hop service for their tram that they have over in the city. So I mean, there's stuff that is going on over there that's really working right now. So I mean, once the system will go out, I mean, it's just gonna push everything else into transit further forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the Hiawatha demonstrates that people do ride trains, despite lots of people thinking that somehow Americans are different than the rest of the world. But there's another one. That is the length of Beijing to Tianjin. And the first high-speed line in China was Beijing to Tianjin, and it's about a half hour, 45 minutes. And a train runs every 10 or 15 minutes. That's what we really should have between Chicago and Milwaukee.
Right, absolutely. And, I've had friends that have gone on to China's high-speed rail system, and just the growth that it has gone through in the last 10 years. I mean, 2008, they just had that. But now they've expanded to have more than the world's high-speed rail system combined and then some.
Well, and in essence, what they've done is the equivalent of connecting Omaha to New York, Boston to Miami, Miami to Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Chicago, down to New Orleans, and lots of stuff in between. They've built that in 10 years. And today they are doing the distance of Chicago to New York in 4.5 hours. The fastest today that you can get from the Loop to Manhattan is 5 hours if you don't get delayed on the Kennedy in your taxi, if you don't have a problem with security, if there's no delay at O'Hare or LaGuardia, and again, another taxi ride. If everything goes absolutely right on that trip, it's 5 hours. In China, it's 4.5 hours by train.
That's incredible, and you can imagine how the airline companies wouldn't have so much fun with that at all. I mean, we had the former chairman of American Airlines down in Florida, Bob Crandall. Bob Crandall was lobbying against Brightline. I mean, it goes to show, the reason why they're really scared about this. Even what happened over in Texas back in the late '80s, early '90s for the Texas Triangle, Southwest was lobbying heavily against that. So, do you see a lot more competition between the airlines once these private companies and the states and federal government start pushing more into transit? Do you see more a pushback from them?
Well, I think Bob Crandall's issue is more of a not in my backyard as opposed to taking the train. And Southwest's business model has changed. It really doesn't make sense to put a plane up in the air to go just 300 miles. And when you figure in the problems at the airports now with how much, it takes longer to get from the ticket counter to the gate at Midway than it did in the 90s because Midway is so much bigger. The security lines are longer. At O'Hare, they're pushing the rental cars out. So the point where, in essence, in comparison, if you were to get off a train at O'Hare and want to get a rental car, so if you get off an airplane at O'Hare today and you want to get a rental car, you're going to have to take a train out to the parking garage where the rental cars are. Today it's actually a bus, and it's a long bus ride.
Oh,
and there'll be a train in the near future. But that is like having your rental car facility at the Hancock Tower if you got off a train at O'Hare at Union Station. The scale of airports has become kind of ridiculous. And so it doesn't make sense to fly from Houston to Dallas anymore. It doesn't make sense to fly from Chicago to St. Louis. And so Southwest isn't as concerned about those short distances as they once were.
Exactly. I think that's what people don't understand. And when they start going into things like, for example, autonomous vehicles, which aren't even at the level that, the media puts them at, that, oh, we're ready to go ahead and sit in our car and it'll take us door to door and we won't have to do anything. There's no need for trains. And the sad part is that a lot of cities are putting a lot of effort into this when the technology isn't even there.
Well, we as Americans have a lot more faith in technology that doesn't exist than we have in God.
Point in being Hyperloop, which we have an episode on that right now, and it's exploded to over 30,000 views. And I mean, just these are simple things that people haven't thought about. Just the sheer economics of the Hyperloop, it just won't work when you compare it to regular high-speed rail even.
That's absolutely true. And your video is the best job of summing up the issues that I've seen. I was very happy to do that.
No, I absolutely do appreciate that because, it's something that the media hasn't spoken about. And, it's crazy that, everybody keeps going on and saying, oh, this is going to be the future. We don't need to worry about high-speed rail. I'm like, guys, high-speed rail is here. China has been pushing so far into it. Japan has been pushing so far into it. Europe. I mean, the only one that's, really so far into the Hyperloop are places that don't have high-speed rail, which is, some places in Europe, the Middle East, and, of course, here in the United States.
But what Hyperloop shows is that people really are looking for something different, something faster, something exciting. And that's really what we need to be talking about.
Exactly.
We need to be talking about Chicago to Cleveland in 2.5 hours. Chicago to Minneapolis, St. Paul in 2.5 hours. Chicago to St. Louis in 2 hours. That's where people start to get excited.
Exactly, right. It's right between those city centers, and it's technology that's right here, right now.
Yep.
So what's been your experience on any high-speed rail around the world? Have you gone to anywhere in Europe or Japan or China on the high-speed systems they have there?
Well, I was in Spain this past summer. And Spain is basically the size of the Midwest. We are more populated than Spain is. And they have already connected the equivalent of Chicago to Cleveland, Detroit, St. Paul, Columbus, Cincinnati. They've already built it, and it's a fantastic system. And their commuter rail systems and even their small towns are really good as well. The one that frustrates me the most is Turkey. It frustrates me that I can ride a high-speed train in Turkey and I can't ride one in the United States. And they have been doing it the right way. They started from Ankara, and they've been building out piece by piece by piece. And the line going into Istanbul is almost complete. They're tackling the most difficult section, which is to get from Istanbul up into the plain where most of the country is. But once you get up onto the plateau, you're going 150 miles an hour. And that's really the approach we should be taking, starting with Chicago and building out just the way Turkey has done.
Yeah. No, it is sad to kind of see that, the United States used to be the forefront, the epitome of what rail transportation used to be. I mean, the network of just intercity, interstate, and even, urban rail transit that we used to have. And now, Turkey. I mean, Uzbekistan and other countries that we used to, make fun of before. I mean, remember back in my dad used to say that, back in the 50s and 60s, to eat your food, there's starving people in China. Now, China has more high-speed rail than anybody else. I mean, it's just incredible how that's flipped about.
Yes, indeed. So this is really something it is easier to get from the Madrid airport to the GM plant there's a GM plant east of Madrid. It's easier to get there than it is to get from O'Hare to the GM plants in Detroit. And at what point do you start to say, well, maybe we need to invest in these areas where it's easier to get around?
And speaking of Detroit, do you think that once systems like this are up in place, do you think places like Detroit will be able to start going back to what they used to be, or going back to, a different direction of, being profitable and prosperous cities again?
Well, all through the Midwest, all of our cities have assets that are not being used as well as they could. Beautiful buildings, wonderful walkable downtowns, fantastic places. The challenge is that you can't get there without your car. And then the space that you have to waste on dealing with that car makes it very difficult to really have efficient places. And so absolutely, Detroit would be more attractive, Chicago would be more attractive, Indianapolis would be more attractive and less expensive to do business in.
Right, absolutely, and that's the thing. I really see the Midwest as a really hidden gem of the United States. I mean, people try to put it down or call it Middle America or something like that, but there's a lot here that isn't really, it's taken for granted. I mean, there's a lot of space. It's a lot of easy and arable land to go on. There's a lot of business that's going in around here, and it's the standard of living is a lot cheaper than places that are already built up, like New York or San Francisco, where people are leaving New York in droves because it's just so expensive to live there.
Absolutely. So we've got a fantastic base to build on. We've got good people. We've got high-skilled labor, excellent universities, great cities. And if we connected them together and started working together much more efficiently, it would really be a much more enjoyable place to live.
Absolutely. So, Rick, tell us, how can we get involved with Midwest High-Speed Rail, and tell the audience here how they can be able to get involved and make sure Midwest High-Speed Rail Association's mission, not just for the Midwest, but for the rest of the United States, moves forward and becomes a success.
You can go to justbuildit.org. So what are we asking the government to do? Just build it.
That's simple.
A nonprofit. So justbuildit.org. Look for the Illinois Fast Track Initiative button and sign the petition. Even if you're not in Illinois, it's more important if you're in Illinois, but Illinois really has the key to making high-speed rail work around the whole region. And so we need to get word to the governor that we really need to step up and become a strong leader and make this happen. So please go to justbuildit.org and sign the petition.
All right. Well, Rick, thank you so much for taking the time to inform us of the efforts of the Midwest High-Speed Rail Association. And if you all want to check out more of what Rick and his team is doing, make sure to visit the website they just visited, just mentioned, justbuildit.org, correct?
Justbuildit.org.
Justbuildit.org. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter. The links are going to be below in the description, and you can ask the association any questions you have and help them out. And be sure to leave a comment below what you are looking forward to see when high-speed rail comes to the Midwest. We're going to be sending one commenter a free American Rail Club sticker, so all you got to do is comment with your answer below. Rick, it has been a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, and keep working on building the future. Don't be a hater, Looper. High-speed rail is here, real, and ready to roll. Subscribe to the American Rail Club and pull that bell. Support ARC further. Upgrade your ticket to ride by supporting us on Patreon and keep this channel chugging out awesome content. Thank you for riding. Next stop, the future.